African Media Initiative's business blog discusses topics pertinent to media businesses on the African continent with business leaders and thought leaders to look at trends, identify opportunities, and examine possible solutions to the many challenges facing media organizations as they try to navigate today's rapidly changing media landscape. In today's discussion, George Twumasi, Chairman and CEO of the African Broadcast Network, talks about the opportunities that cloud broadcasting offers African media organizations.
The reason why I believe that the cloud is a very viable propellant of success for the future of African broadcasting are as follows. First, there's a lot of archivable content, well over 1 million hours of quality archivable content on the continent, extrapolated from the very simple basis that over the past 5 years, a lot of content has been stored, sitting on shelves across 37 sub-Saharan African countries. So that is at a very minimum 1 million hours of content. If you extrapolate way back retrospectively for over the past 50 years, I don't know how much of that is viable, but you certainly have maybe 15 to 30 million hours of content. All that's at the very worst case scenario, that represents Africa's cultural heritage, and that needs to be stored for future generations. It can be repurposed or reaggregated for redistribution as classics of sorts, for different narrowcaster channels around genres, for example, around history or biography or health, whatever it might pertain to. Secondly, the cloud storage system allows for the creation of a digital content industry, straddling music, video, books, learning, and games. This is an industry that seems to find its footing on the continent. Thirdly, the cloud allows for OTT and IPTV playouts. What it means is non-linear television, which plays out, aside from linear television, which plays on normal TV broadcasting, on mobile telephones, other kind of delivery systems such as Android forms of tablets, and in the future phablets such as Samsung and the Huawei EDO. There are 3 strands of content producers in Africa, or 3 types of content producers. The street hawk, the street level, which is the cottage industry, typified or epitomized by, with all good intent, by Nollywood. The second is orchestrated production, which happens every single day by the national broadcaster or the commercial broadcaster. For example, news programming is content that's got to be produced. The third is user-generated content. People doing their own thing with digicams, right? There's a lot of that. That's what's driven current TV in the US. The difference between broadcasting in Africa and elsewhere is that broadcasting is now server-based in many countries. People derive content and place them in cloud storage systems. In Africa, it doesn't exist. Yes, the business case for a cloud is, in the short term, let's look at the diaspora market. They don't have any broadband issues. There are well over, according to the World Bank, there are 281 million people of African descent in the world. There's a school of thoughts which goes as follows. Non-Africans, i.e. non-African Africans, African Americans, and people of African descent who don't have much to do with the content will not be interested in African content. I tend to disagree. It's the way and manner in which it's marketed, packaged and marketed. So there's a market there. Then there's the first generation African who's traveled abroad and is settled outside of Africa, in Western Europe, and in North America mostly, right, who creates families over there. And if you put them together, you've got about 5 to 6 or 10 or maybe 15 million, who knows. A majority of those are Nigerian and West African. But nonetheless, they do represent a broadband-ready market. In Africa, the argument is that broadband costs are very high at the moment. Currently, as of today, it is true. But it's a supply and demand ratio-driven proposition. If you have a great demand for African content, right, the supply curve will come down, right, and therefore the costs will reduce. If you have if you have an oversupply without the reciprocity requirements of demand playing out in the market, the price for broadband goes up. So I think content which is made for Africans by Africans, right, which is segmented or which is genre specific, which is of interest, lifestyle, health, education, food, cooking, right, to the ordinary African, experiencing other African nations through their mobile telephone, is something that will sell. It's all about the packaging, and that's where it's all about being in the cloud, because when it's in the cloud, you can repurpose it. When it's not in the cloud, there's no non-linear television. In film, there's this concept, or in television, in filming, there's the concept of the persistence of vision, POV. It's a filmmaker's lingua, as it were. But basically, it applies to everything in life. The more other Africans tend to go for holidays abroad. In recent times, Africans have started going for holidays in South Africa, in part. But there are many other countries. There's Namibia, there's the Seychelles, there are parts of West Africa. There's so much Africa has to offer Africans. But as you can tell yourself, the industry is often patronized by Western Europeans and Western people from the West, Americans. Right? It's not true that Africans don't like to travel. Right, Africans have forever migrated from one part of the continent to over the centuries. Right, so I think what tourism and the cloud would do together, fusing those two together, is you create a non-linear line, right, by which the persistence of the beauty of Africa can be celebrated, right, and in so doing, the psyche of the African who wishes to travel, not having a lot of money, will change, right? And people begin to travel across border to see great sights, experience good food, new people, new ideas, and re-engage in a new kind of sociological dynamic for Africa. First is from a policy reconfiguration perspective. Whether or not it's of monetizable value, it's heritage. It's got to get done, and it will be work which is under $100 million, but its value proposition is what has to be sold to governments. They've got to see a value proposition which is tangible, and that is a policy-driven initiative. Secondly, in terms of the creation of business models that are viable. Because when you invest money, you want to make up money. To look at the creation of a public-private partnership, whereby the revenue of the states is utilized to guarantee, right, the creation of new content over a long period. So there could be a 20-year guarantee by 20 African countries, right, whereby their revenue commitments to the creation of an industry, like the Mussolini period during the golden age of film in Italy, or the French did to preserve French cultural integrity. Africa must do the same. And in the digital age, if Africa doesn't wake up to that reality, right, what's going to happen is, in small bits, there's going to be a recolonization of the African mind. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah wrote about the African personality. And it's the little things, it's our mythology that defines our personality. And if we allow our mythology to be redefined by Western image and syntax development, then we'll lose that originality that constitutes our fabric as Africans. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be sociologically mobile, but we should retain a core that allows us to forge an identity which is unique and powerful. And that is only through television and film.